Hello, welcome to Collaborative Meal Planning for Clients with Mental Health Nutrition Needs. I'm Allison, and I'm thrilled to be joined by Avita and Brittany from That Clean Life and Practice Better. And today we're going to be talking about how we can use some evidence-based tools with your clients who might have mental health nutrition needs. So today we're going to go over some research to really root what we're doing in some actual evidence, to talk about some dietary targets. We'll look at 3 different trials that have happened and identify the differences between the approaches and how we can actually apply them clinically and translate them into clinical practice. We'll also then take a look at some client assessment tools. That's going to help serve as a route for collaboration with your clients. And then we're also going to talk about just different nuances to approaching different types of clients while we're completing the assessment process, how we can integrate the tools in practice better with that assessment process, and then also taking it all the way through to more application when we learn more about how to actually do meal planning for these clients and integrate all of the dietary targets that come from the research right now about mental health nutrition. So, favorite quote, dietary guidelines have to be simple. Nutrition is not simple. I think this is probably something that resonates with most of us. Our job is beautifully complex and requires so much nuance, and we need to be very client-centered and personalized in our approach. And especially when we're working with the population that may have mental health nutrition support needs, we want to make sure that we're staying very client-centered and working with the client and making sure that we're not coming just simply from a prescriptive place, but a true place of collaboration. We need inspiration for collaboration, and inspiration can come from the research. So one of the first trials we're going to take a look at today is a SMILES trial. This was a 12-week parallel group style intervention where they took a group of folks who were assessed in terms of the eligibility process for this study. They had to have been diagnosed with depression. They had to either have been engaging in some kind of intervention consistently over time. So they weren't new to therapy. They weren't new to taking a medication. They had been using those interventions, and those interventions seemed to be supportive and consistent over a certain amount of time to qualify for this study. That way they were able to really have a nice group to make sure that there wasn't anything new in terms of treatment that was going to be happening during the dietary study. And so half the group were assigned to receiving the dietary education intervention, and half the group just stayed on their regular diet. The interesting thing about this intervention, there was no calorie limit. The breakdown of macros was fairly standard. It was 18, 40%, and 27%. And when we look at the more specific elements of this breakdown, it was very much emphasizing whole grains. So 5 to servings of whole grains a day, 6 servings of vegetables a day, 3 servings of fruit. And you can read on with the rest of the slide where it kind of de-emphasized a little bit of the red meat, but it really made sure that clients were encouraging them to eat fish at least twice a week, welcoming low fat and unsweetened dairy, as well as beans, and 3 tablespoons of olive oil a day. That's specific. I'm pointing it out because we'll be talking about olive oil in one of the other trials as well. And you might think about kind of your average client coming in. This is potentially quite the departure for kind of your standard diet, where it's much higher in vegetables, whole grains. So many folks also potentially aren't necessarily seafood aficionados. So this might be a departure for many folks who aren't used to incorporating these kinds of foods into their regular diet. It also provided some education about reducing sweets, some processed foods like refined cereals, fried foods. Certainly, it de-emphasized processed meats and beverages that had added sweetener, and trying to limit alcohol specifically only to red or white wine and only 2 standard drinks per day. Anything else was considered kind of extra. Also, red wine only with meals. Then we have the Predi-DEP trial. And this trial was completed in Spain, and it was much longer. It was a couple of years long. And this was looking again at how diet might impact mood for participants who were diagnosed previously with depression. And highlighting olive oil in this one, because with this study, it was recommended to use olive oil as the main cooking fat, and salad dressing fat. And it was recommended that they have at least 4 tablespoons of olive oil per day. So at least, so participants could have more. The veggie serving was a little bit lower, but with this one, it's still recommending at least 2 servings of vegetables, which I don't know about you, but I know for some of my clients that still would be a big change for them. And emphasizing things like legumes, a little bit more seafood, welcoming nuts, trying to emphasize the animal proteins that have a little bit less of the saturated fats. And something interesting about this trial is it incorporated 2 servings a week of sofrito, which is it's essentially a condiment. It's like a sauce that has some tomato and onion and leeks or garlic, and it's a very savory, kind of sweet sauce, cooked in olive oil, and that can be used as a condiment on almost anything. It's absolutely delicious, and it's a great example of how a condiment actually can be rich in plant foods and rich in vegetables, and that can, in this particular trial, it was its own thing, but it didn't take the place of a vegetable serving, but it is an extra vegetable serving. And so something that I know I like to do with my clients, especially where we're trying to make sure that they have validating care, that what they like to eat is something that we're welcoming in, getting creative with condiments, whether it's something like sofrito or sauerkraut or kimchi or some kind of relish or even pickles. All of that, it can count potentially as a vegetable, or a plant food, and it can help make food rather delicious and, potentially more culturally centered. And then with this study, they did recommend, a serving ish of wine per day as well. They de-emphasize red meats, and processed meats. So one theme that we do see is the de-emphasizing of processed meats, also de-emphasizing things like butter, margarine, cream, so kind of that higher fat dairy, or margarine being more of a processed dairy, the sweetened beverages, and the sweetened foods. The third trial we're taking into consideration is the MIND diet. And the MIND diet, something that this was focused on a little bit different. It's looking at the senior population and how diet might play a role both in cognitive health and in mood. And with this trial, they were looking again at emphasizing things like whole grains, nuts, beans, legumes. And something unique about this was they separated out veggies and green leafy veggies. And so trying to have the client have both a green leafy veggie and at least another veggie. So it's being a little bit more prescriptive and specific about the types of vegetables to incorporate during, the week for participants. Also emphasize berries specifically in the fruit choice. And there have been some other studies recently. There was one study in particular that showed that potentially incorporating more strawberries was helpful with cognitive health on a regular basis. So berries are really rich in phytonutrients and, all kinds of other, antioxidants, as we all know. And so there might be a connection between how incorporating berries as a fruit choice may help with reducing inflammation, which is going to impact cognitive health and mood, and also making sure that folks are having a serving of fish. Again, emphasizing olive oil as the main cooking fat. Reducing added sweets, red meat, the more saturated fat forms of dairy, which seems to be a theme kind of across all of the different diets. And we can take a look at how these diets compare to each other. You can see a lot of similarities. The thing that's really interesting is thus far, the results of these two trials, especially the one that's 2 years long and the one that was 12 weeks long, the MIND diet is a little bit newer, and we're still waiting on getting some more of that data. But thus far, the data is statistically significant in showing that these dietary changes did impact mood in a positive way. So depression scores improve, and that can be a really helpful component in the entire care process for somebody who experiences a mental health concern. I do think that for some clients, jumping all the way up to 6 servings a day is probably a lot of work and potentially unrealistic, but we can certainly be client-centered in how we work towards that in the outpatient setting, potentially. And there's a lot of great ways to do that that are truly collaborative with your clients. So as you can see, some common themes emphasizing legumes, fruits, the MIND diet being specific about berries, and then with the veggies, trying to make sure that we're getting those green leafies in and a nice variety of veggies in the other diets as well. Welcoming seafood, that seems to be a common theme. It's interesting that for the most part, the SMILES trial was saying yes to welcoming red meat 3 to 4 times a week. The others kind of de-emphasized it a little bit more, and that there was more an emphasis on poultry, so the less saturated fat forms of animal protein. And one thing that's also really specific is the recommendation about alcohol. So in the SMILES trial, it was no more than 2 glasses. The Predimed, it was at 1 glass plus potentially a day. And then the MIND diet specifically did not make any recommendations about alcohol. And that's probably because it's being studied in the senior population, and making recommendations about alcohol might incur some fall risk. So we probably want to limit our recommendations about alcohol in that population. So we can have all this data. It's super interesting, right? But we want to be practical. You're all busy. I'm busy. We want to use it with our clients in a fun and very client-specific way. I'm going to turn it over to Avita so that you can see how this was built into That Clean Life. So you can actually use this information and this data with your clients right away.
Thanks so much, Allison. I still absolutely love the line that you say dietary guidelines have to be simple. Nutrition is not simple. And so making this really easy for clients to follow is so important, and That Clean Life can help bring that to life. So these trials too, all of these numbers that you're talking about, and there's so many different elements, can seem overwhelming for a practitioner as well to be like, okay, well, how do I actually give this to my client? I can't give them this full list of foods to emphasize and de-emphasize. There needs to be in a actionable resource. And so that's where That Clean Life comes in. That Clean Life makes it possible for you to provide the right nutrition plan for the right client in the right way with ease, helping you to elevate your client experience and make your clients more successful and grow your business. So I'd love to show you how to create recipe books and meal plans for all of the 3 trials that Allison mentioned. Starting with our recipe database. So with That Clean Life, you can find the right recipes in seconds using our filters. So we have over 100 ways to filter recipes, such as finding recipes based on time, number of ingredients. And then we've got filters such as, basing it on cultural cuisine. Like Allison mentioned, being culturally sensitive is really important. Cooking appliance, meal time and meal type, dietary needs, allergies and intolerances, and even things like specific protein options as you're emphasizing maybe fish and lean protein options versus red meat. You can use our tags for that. You can also search for recipes for ingredients you want to include, as well as ingredients you want to exclude, and nutrition information such as calories, macronutrients, vitamins, and minerals. So let's start with the SMILES trial that Allison mentioned. It's based on the Mediterranean diet. So if you were starting off creating a plan for your client for that, again, you would just use our Mediterranean tag. Super simple, makes it easy to find recipes when either building a personalized meal plan or recipe book from scratch. So filters it down really easily. We also have a ton of templates, over 100, 145 right now. So these are done for you plans covering a wide variety of dietary condition. Each plan comes with a overview, evidence based on scientific evidence to help you build that plan, a prep guide, as well as your meal plan, recipes, and a grocery list. And so we have it on different conditions, including we've got one for depression support. If you were using it, for example, for the Smiles trial, and if you're really focusing on that Mediterranean diet, you could even filter down our templates to find plans that use the Mediterranean diet principles. So we've got things like our hormone balancing diet, we've got a plant-based Mediterranean diet, as well as just the omnivore Mediterranean diet that you can use with your client right away. All you have to do is make a copy of that, and then you can fully modify that template. So we've got those done for you plans, but if you're building from scratch, you can modify those templates, or you can build from scratch using those filters. So going back to the recipe filters, something Alison mentioned was seafood or fish. So adding things like our seafood tag, or if you want to get more specific, including a seafood option that your client really likes, like salmon fillet. That's a popular, easy to add one. And then you can filter the recipes down. Maybe you want to go a little bit further because it's showing 70 recipes. That's a lot for you to look through. So making it super easy, let's make this one pan meals, filter it down, and then we've got 22 salmon recipes to choose from. If you were perhaps building that plan and you wanted to add in some type of snack, so Alison mentioned adding in nuts is really important. So something like including almonds, and you want to just have this to be a snack, still using the Mediterranean diet, and then have this just be 3 ingredients. So you can get really specific with how you want that plan to look like, and building it exactly to your client's needs. If you were building it and you want to have maybe some other types of meals, like you want to include whole grains, and maybe your client's favorite grain is couscous. So we'll include recipes that are using couscous, a fruit and vegetable. For legumes, maybe we'll pick we'll use, say, chickpeas. And then for the Smiles trial, this is going to be removing or reducing sugar. So we'll use that sugar-free tag. And we want minimally processed food, so we're going to use the unprocessed tag and filter that down. We've got 2 options to choose from there. So you can add and remove tags and filters to really see to really find the right recipes. And when you click into any of our recipes, you'll see the directions, the notes. A feature that we recently also added is AI Health Insights, which gives you insights about each recipe that you can also share with your clients. So it tells you about like the fiber, the protein, vitamins, minerals, gives them more insight into or understanding into why you're recommending a specific recipe. And then you've got your ingredients, nutrition facts, and any tags. You can edit any of our recipes, and you can also add your own recipes, and this will get added to your personal recipe box. But you can also disable nutrition information. So if you've got a client who is maybe a little bit not ready to follow or to look at nutrition information per recipe or for their whole plan, you can also disable that nutrition information. And as you put together that plan, this is sort of what it will start to look like. For the Predidept diet, going back to our recipes filters, similarly, again, we would use the Mediterranean tag when building out a plan, so similar filters from that Smiles trial. But Alison mentioned olive oil is a really big focus here. So here we're going to include extra virgin olive oil for any recipes that we're looking for. We're also going to limit sodium. So nutrition, let's go to look for the minerals, and we'll make sure each recipe has no more than about 500 milligrams of sodium and filter that down. Maybe you want to have a preferential consumption of a specific protein option like chicken. So we'll use our chicken tag. Truly, we have over 100 ways to filter recipes. So any type of filtering you want to get down to, you can use that in there. So filter that down. 160 recipes to choose from. So maybe we'll look for recipes that only take 30 minutes to make. Filter that down. And then you would add this to your plan. So if you're building your plan from blanks, scratch, you would say maybe this is the Predidept plan, create that plan, and then you can start adding recipes to it. And so we'll add this to, for example, for dinner for 2 days. And then this is what it looks like as you start to build it. You can move recipes around, mark as leftover as needed as well. And then you would build out the full plan, or you can build out a recipe collection. I started building out a collection here of just one pan recipes using specific protein options and some of those principles off the Pretty Depp and the Mind diet. Another thing Allison mentioned was dressing and condiments help bring so much joy to food, which I think is also extremely important. So something that you can filter for within That Clean Life is using our dressing tag and then narrowing down and finding those options, or using those condiments like, for example, sauerkraut or kimchi. And again, finding those culturally sensitive, relevant recipes as well. Really made easy using That Clean Life. We've got tags for African inspired recipes, Indian, Caribbean, Middle Eastern, Mediterranean, of course, as well as Asian inspired and African, I think I said African inspired, and then a couple more in there as well. So tons of ways to filter those recipes down to find exactly what you need. Another thing if you wanted to do was excluding certain ingredients. So if in the Pretty Depp diet, we're de-emphasizing butter, so you could remove butter as the protein or exclude butter in those recipes as well. And then with the Mind diet, the difference with it was including berries. Allison mentioned specifically strawberries. So here we could, include to find recipes that have just strawberries in them, or having green leafy vegetables instead of just vegetables. So you would look for recipes and maybe have specifically baby spinach or maybe baby kale or something like that. And then filter down. If you're finding recipes that are dairy-free, as the Mind diet uses less dairy, then again, super easy, use a dairy-free tag and narrow that down. We have a drink tag for less alcohol. If you, like Allison mentioned with the Mind diet, maybe, studied on seniors, maybe even used with seniors. And if you're trying to find different options for helping your clients to stay hydrated, but you don't want to suggest alcohol, you can use our drink tag and find like mocktails or just like delicious beverages for them to add to still get those nutrients. Maybe they're trying to still add in some antioxidants. So finding options here made super simple. Within our templates too, I had shown you the depression support template and the Mediterranean diet tag, but we've also got actually the Mind diet. We've got two done for you templates, the Mind diet and the plant-based Mind diet. So these are done for you templates that you can use with your client. They come with those prep guides and the evidence over there too. And we've got so we'll look for under templates, you've got actually the brain health support program. So I'll show you that. And so this uses the Mind diet. Our brain health support program was developed using the Mind diet framework. And then you've got that evidence in there. But I also wanted to just point out that prep guide. So all of our templates come with a prep guide that walks your clients through how to prep for each day within their meal plan. So within this brain health support program, I'll just give you a preview of what that looks like. Anything grayed out is a leftover, because we like your client to cook once and eat several times. And then this prep guide that's already done for you would walk them through each day of how to stay on plan. So that's for creating meal plans. But again, if you wanted to create just like a collection of recipes, I had mentioned I started creating a collection for a sample client named Wendy Porter, which Brittany's going to show us how to do an assessment for and practice better. But here I've used like the dairy-free, sugar-free, one pan, pork-free, soy-free meal prep tags, as well as looking for recipes that are 30 minutes and under, 6 ingredients, and use chicken as like the main protein. And then we've got some breakfasts and snacks in there too. So you can provide your client with a recipe collection, as well as a meal planning guide where you can take them right into the software for them to create their own meal plan. So I'll show you what that looks like. If you had a client where you just provide them a collection of recipes and then you give them a blank meal plan, they can actually go into That Clean Life and start creating a plan based on those recipes that you had given them, so that they can have some autonomy too, some flexibility with creating their plan. And then you as a practitioner can see everything on your end of what they're doing. So you can also use That Clean Life to teach your clients how to do their own meal planning. You can add a selection of breakfasts, lunches, and dinners into their plan to a collection, add a blank plan, share this with your client, and when they open the link, they will see the recipes along with the blank plan where they can start creating their plan based on what you provided. So this is also a great way to keep clients engaged and on track with their health goals. So that's it for me, and then we'll get back to you, Allison, to go into actually using this to collect the right information for your clients.
Okay, so thank you so much. I love also just doing that in that screen sharing way with actual clients. They get so excited when they can see the visual of what the food looks like. There's so many little things like it might feel sometimes a little simple as a clinician. It kind of hit that imposter button of, should I tell my client that they can have almonds with peaches? But the client might be like, I never thought to combine almonds with peaches. I'm totally going to do that this week. And it just increases the likelihood of them even having the nuts and the fruit. And that visual just helps it make it so much more connected. And it makes it so real for them. So I love doing that with clients. It's so fun.
I agree. I even think like even for myself, so all of our recipes are created in-house by our team of recipe developers and like beautifully photographed, which is excellent. And we know it tastes good. It's like rest assured these recipes will work in your family kitchen. But we've got over 6,300 recipes and we add new recipes weekly. So clearly there's this constant flow of inspiration. And sometimes we just get stuck in our ways of meal planning or prepping for the week that as a practitioner, we also might just forget some new combinations and ways to do things. So at least you've got like That Clean Life, new recipes every week. You'll see new ideas and you can keep yourself inspired and your clients inspired, which I agree. So helpful.
Yeah,
Have you ever
absolutely.
heard the stat that people go to the grocery store and buy the same 10 ingredients every single time that they grocery shop? So it's that kind of like cyclical habitual behavior that even something simple like that recommendation you just shared, Allison, of like peaches and almonds can just like Avita said, inspire some new behaviors and some new shopping habits even.
Exactly. And when clients buy something they don't normally buy, but they don't know what they're going to do with it, it doesn't get used. It's like buying a new shirt that has like a color or a texture to it that you're like, this shirt's really cool, but you don't have pants that go with the shirt. You have no idea what you're going to wear the shirt with. Sometimes meal planning is like thinking about your closet. What am I going to wear the shirt with? And so it's so helpful when That Clean Life has the visual image of what you're going to do with the peaches.
I
So,
love that analogy. That is so good. I'm gonna have to use that one. So
so they don't go bad.
yeah, absolutely. We're
Yeah.
saving, we're reducing grocery bills and like reducing food waste in that way too, which is so important for clients.
Yeah, for sure. That the shopping list helps with that so much. So let's talk about some more practical things. Um, so how do we actually help clients implement these guidelines from the trials that we looked at and actually start meal prepping and meal planning? One of the populations I love working with so much are the clients that really just have never gotten in the kitchen and they're brand new to it. And it feels really overwhelming. And so we want to make sure we're assessing the client's resources as well as their skill set. And sometimes we can feel as nutrition providers like we're supposed to educate, educate, educate. And sometimes instead of educating content, we're really helping empower the client with skills. That's a very different energy in session. And it can be such a beautiful investment in the client's health long term. And they build self-efficacy and they feel better about themselves and they get so much out of their investment with their time with you. And so that comes from roots in a good assessment. So we need to assess their grocery shopping skills. And instead of just jumping right to education, let's just see where they're at. Let's see who in the household is responsible for food prep. What's going on with their budget? What do they know about preparing food? I had a client this week and we're trying to get her to eat more protein. And we talked about the idea of making tuna salad. And spoiler alert, it ends in me making a tuna salad recipe booklet from That Clean Life. But before we get there, we were talking about how to make tuna salad. And this is highly educated client, very smart, very creative person with an incredibly thriving life who has never made tuna salad in their entire life. They love it. They've had it out, but they've never actually made it themselves. They didn't even know that you could like take tuna from a can and mix it with a salad dressing and throw some dried cranberries in there and call it a day. And going over that was so helpful for them, and they were inspired and excited and ready to go and try to do that. We had to spend some time just talking about, had they ever made anything like that before? Do they, what do they have in their kitchen? Where would they feel comfortable buying those ingredients? And to get started, we're even going to have them just go to a deli and buy some tuna salad and then try to replicate it at home. So, everybody's different. Everybody's starting from a different place. So we got to figure out, where is the client starting from? What are they excited about trying? And what kind of tools do they have at home? Kitchen equipment, any other barriers, financial, potentially mobility related barriers as well to prepping food, and just talking about it with the client to make sure we're staying client centered. And then once we have our assessment, we can do the education piece. So that's when we can get into doing the meal plans and recipe booklets and shopping lists, and or potentially explore meal delivery services or getting stuff pre-made at a deli that is really yummy, potentially for your client as well. And so asking them all of these questions: who's doing the shopping? Do you go to the store in person, or do you get grocery delivery? One of my favorite things to help increase the likelihood busy clients who don't have a ton of cooking experience actually start making food at home is to give that permission to do grocery delivery. Obviously, this depends on where the client lives and where they're located and their resources. But at this point, we have so many options in many places for grocery delivery. It gives them time to focus on actually being with the food instead of potentially the stress and the extra time of like driving, parking, dealing with shopping, all that kind of stuff. It also potentially accommodates physical barriers, transportation barriers. How often do they typically need to shop, or can they shop? What stores do they have near them? What types of foods? And then just, we need to have a conversation with our clients about how the client actually eats food. Where are they when they eat? Are they sitting at a table? Do they use plates or bowls that they really like? I once had a client who was only eating off of paper plates. He was young, he didn't want to do dishes. And it was actually, we figured out, and he was the one who figured it out, that the paper plates were playing a big role in his relationship to food. And so we just started exploring that a little bit and seeing how shifting that to potentially a real plate and talking about how we can make cleanup a little bit easier might change things. And it really changed mealtime for him. So other ways that we can just help our clients be more effective at purchasing, selecting, preparing, and eating food so that it's more easeful for them. Love talking about kitchen appliances, could do that all day long. And it's so helpful that That Clean Life allows you to search by one pan and potentially other kitchen appliances. I once had a client who literally lived in a studio apartment. The only cooking tool they had was a pressure cooker. That was it. That was our entire palette. So we had to just work with pressure cooker recipes. That was it. And so trying to figure out what other kinds of cooking equipment they have, and how we can make sure that the recipes we're getting are going to be helpful for them, especially with the population of clients who might have mental health nutrition needs. One pan meals are your friend. I am a big fan of especially the sheet pan meals that are available in That Clean Life, and helping clients learn they can just put down parchment paper, throw it in the oven. Cleanup is really easy. It just increases the likelihood of the food actually happening and building that self-efficacy. And then, of course, talking about like how much food storage and what kind of tools do they have. If they have roommates, how much room is for them in the fridge? Do they have like a little part of a shelf? Do they have a whole shelf? That's going to impact how much they can prep at a time. And so that will depend on what your client's situation is. How much time they have to deal with food, how much they want to spend dealing with food, their experience, of course, dietary restrictions, which I bet everybody watching is probably a pro at navigating. And then, are there any other kinds of medical or physical barriers? What else kind of support they have, and kitchen equipment access? always helpful to go over. And the thing that's so much fun in That Clean Life is that you can use the filters like Avita showed to include foods that your client loves. I love starting from a place of what are some of your food loves this week? What do you have a craving for this week? And we can search using those filters, especially if they're then also aligned with the research that comes from something like the Pretty Depth trial or the Mind Diet. And then what do they not like? We can also use filters to potentially exclude the foods that they don't really enjoy. And I have a client who is totally into eating canned salmon, but doesn't want to eat salmon fillets. That's great. I love that it's separate and that you can search by each and that we can actually like find recipes for both those things. And then just even more ways to be culturally competent in terms of if there's any foods that they prefer to avoid for any kind of religious or ethical reason, any kind of other cultural aspects of food that are important to the client, how we can work that in. And if we're considering all of these questions, including sensory questions, which I think especially for this population that we're talking about right now, we want to make sure that the food temperature, texture, all those things feel accessible to the client. And having the visual in That Clean Life makes it so much easier, as well as the filters. All of these questions can create a very organic conversation. It almost can feel like a mindfulness experience for the client where they get guided through thinking about like, what do I think about food? And sometimes they think about this all the time, and sometimes they don't ever think about this stuff. So it can be really fun for them. So once you figure out how do they cook, what do they know how to cook, how much time do they have, all these things, are we talking about batch cooking and freezing? Can we play with pre-chopping? Can we try cooking multiple items all at the same time? How can we make their week easier once we've completed the assessment process and figure out what are all of the ways that we can help them feel like they've really set themselves up for success with food for their week? Sometimes that also means, and this is why when you look at the programs in Practice and That Clean Life, and they have the prep guides, it's so helpful to see like, take the chicken out of the freezer this day. Like there's instructions in there that the clients can really use to plan out their week. And sometimes there are clients who can meal prep everything for the week on one day, and sometimes they really need to break it up throughout the week. And so trying to have that conversation, plan out when is the work going to happen so that they can plan ahead for their week is going to be really helpful. And obviously there's some soft skills used here and some nuance, but we also are busy people and we want to be able to get this information as quickly and efficiently as possible and help the client be prepared for the conversation. So I'm going to turn it over back to Brittany and talk about the fabulous assessment tools that have actually been built into Practice Better.
Awesome. All right, let me share my screen so we can head into Practice Better and take a look. So Practice Better, of course, is a practice management software to run your business, including meeting with your clients, delivering resources, and providing support. So let's show you how you can create an assessment form to learn about how to take your clients' needs and preferences and start to action them. And it's so important to involve them in the process, as Allison has shared with us. So we're in Practice Better now. Let's take a look at our custom form builder, where we can actually take a lot of those questions that Allison just shared with us and compile them in a custom form to work with the client. So I'm in the form builder now. You can always default to this red fast action button and use this to start creating a form from scratch. You'll have all of these tools on the right-hand side. These are form elements that will allow you to build your questions and format them in the way that you are collecting the information as best as possible. I've already created an example today based on all of those things that Allison just shared with us. So let's go ahead and search for our meal plan assessment form. Now, using those form elements, as I just shared, we have built this assessment form with a lot of the questions that we just overviewed. We'll collect the client's information, understand how they're shopping, what kinds of tools they have in their kitchen, their preferences. This is one consolidated place that your client can input all of this information so that you have tons of guidance on how to advise them, how you can meet them where they're at, and start to provide them recommendations that are going to truly serve them rather than just assuming that they have access to everything, or not really understanding their true preferences or dietary practices or restrictions. So we can build this entirety, the entirety of this form here, and deliver it to a client either for them to fill out, or we can make this a very collaborative activity where we can complete it with the client in session. So of course, involving the client is a really good way to get their buy-in and to support, behavioral change, which can be really difficult for some people, if not all of us, breaking some of our current habits and all of that. So let's take a look at, once you have built this meal plan assessment form, exactly how you can deliver it. So I can automatically have it delivered to the client as part of a package or an individual session that I'm hosting for them. And the client can fill this out digitally on their computer, smartphone, tablet, and send it back to me. So we have the option of doing something like setting up an automation. And this is based on a particular trigger. So let's use our red fast action button. And we can say that we want a form to be automatically sent after a booking or a package is confirmed. Let's go ahead and say we want it to go with the booking. We can name this Deliver Meal Plan Assessment, select the service that we'd like this to trigger. So maybe we're going to do the initial consultation, select whatever service is relevant and when you're going to bring this into the actual client side of things. So it could even be, a particular meal planning service that you create for them, where you're doing that as the assessment together. And then we can send it depending on when that session is taking place. So whether that's immediately or before or after the session date. So if I was hosting, say, a meal plan assessment appointment type, I might want to send this 2 or 3 days in advance so the client has time to overview the form, fill it out, go through their kitchen, really think and be very considerate when they're filling out the form. And then I get to choose which form that I'd like to be sent. So that meal plan assessment form. So very quick and easy to set up that automation. So anytime that a client is booking in for that particular service, say 2 to 3 days before that service takes place on my calendar, the client will be automatically delivered that meal plan assessment form and can fill it out digitally and send it back to me. Alternatively, we can do something different. We can go back to our forms and waivers, and let's say that we have that client in session in the moment. We can find that form that we have created. So let's go ahead and search that again and use the More Options button and select Complete for Client. We'll then be tasked with choosing the client here, and we can have that real-time conversation with them where we can use those soft skills, as Allison was saying, to really make it conversational and get even more information than maybe the client would be willing to include when they're just kind of in the motion of filling out a form. So that's definitely an option for you as well, and might be worth kind of experimenting with to see how that impacts your workflows, or if it increases the type of information that you get back from the client. Whichever method you decide to roll with, once the client has completed that form, you will be able to access it through the client record. So this is kind of like your living documentation of everything pertinent to this particular client. And down the left-hand menu here, I can see I have a section on forms and waivers. So you can see here, I've got this example meal plan assessment form that was completed. And I have the ability to annotate, so I can take notes, I can download it, or simply just take a look and review this form and what the client had to say. So this is going to be incredibly helpful for informing my next steps in providing my recommendations, putting together those meal plans and recipe collections for the client to start to action and work towards some really tangible efforts towards their health and wellness goals. So if I needed to write any notes, I could even pin those notes so they stay nice and accessible for me at the top, or again, just simply review it on behalf of the client. So really important so that your next efforts as a practitioner actually go somewhere. If we were to just kind of assume or blankly, put something together, there's a good chance that that client is maybe not going to action that, and then it kind of feels for naught. So it can be very defeating as a practitioner to be like, why didn't you take action on your meal plan? Or, you have that follow-up session where the client hasn't really taken action and you're left kind of scratching your head. So this should hopefully help circumvent any situations like that. All right, so now that we have kind of gotten to that part of the client journey where we have met with them, we've had that kind of thorough discussion or information collection about their dietary preferences, things like their tools, their lifestyle habits surrounding food, we can start to put together resources and package them in a really intuitive way for the client where it's all in one place, it's very readily accessible for them, and they're not having to navigate a bunch of places to find all of these different things that we're sharing with them. We're going to do that through a feature in Practice Better called protocols. So protocols are where you can house all your recommendations, your advice for your client, including things like recipe collections and meal plans directly from that Clean Life. And I recommend creating a protocol template to allow for consistency and ease. So you can format and house commonly made recommendations and still tailor the protocol to your specific client to ensure that it is custom to their needs. Oftentimes as practitioners, especially when we kind of specialize and hone in on a certain area, we're making a lot of the same common recommendations. So this is a way of kind of eliminating that repetitive work and repeating ourselves and still having the ability to customize for the client. So let's take a look at the mental health support. And we'll walk through everything that you can include in a protocol. In a protocol, you'll be able to name it. So this is internal only. So the client is not going to see that this is my mental health support protocol. They won't see that on their end necessarily. But again, when you customize this for the client, if you wanted to change that, you absolutely could. So it has their name or something of that nature. You can easily distinguish it. You can set the focus, the duration. If you have the intent of working with the client long-term, this might be something that's very, has iterations to it, where you're starting basic and you get a little bit more involved. So that duration can be really helpful. In the protocol notes section, this is where you can really start to educate the client. So providing the rationale and some of the kind of the reason or logic behind exactly why you've put together this certain recommendation, or just helping to kind of build up that foundation of knowledge for the client. And you can format in a variety of ways. So I always say, we're kind of living in a time where people are so inundated with content and short form content at that providing like really heavy text might just get lost on some people. So you have the ability to do things like embed videos. You can record a video of yourself so it feels really personal and high touch point, include links. You can do things like audio, images, and really break it up so that you're catering to different learning styles and making it feel digestible and easy for people to get that foundation of knowledge as you're educating with a protocol. One thing that I do want to point out as we look at this example here today is that not every element of this protocol is necessary for you to fill out. So if I left this blank and only have the intention of saying, passing over the recipe collections, the meal plans, and maybe some lifestyle or supplement recommendations, the client won't be, feeling like something is missing. They won't know that you have left something that was available to you blank. You'll have the ability to attach files, disclaimers, and food recommendations. So this particular section is where you can highlight certain key ingredients that you have intentionally included or maybe discluded in their meal plan, or if you wanted to pay attention to certain nutrients or something like that, anything that you want to kind of draw attention to for your client, this is a fantastic place to do so. When you're adding these recommendations, you'll be able to add the recommendation, provide examples, and an explanation. I always think this is a super helpful part so that the client understands, again, the why. I think they're likely to action it if they can understand why a certain recommendation is made. I know, like back in the day, cilantro, like it wasn't something that was a common part of my diet until I understood like the health benefits of it, and then I was more open to trying it. So sometimes that explanation can really go a long way. From there, you can say whether you want to include, reduce, or exclude a food item. And then when you pass over this protocol to the client, it will be nicely organized so the client exactly understands what to include, disclude, or simply reduce. So I've highlighted certain things that Avita has shared and that we learned from the trials that is going to support our clients' mental health. So everything from particular proteins, 30-minute meals, 6 ingredients or less, olive oil, of course, so that the client understands why and how I've put that meal plan together for them. All right, and now if you are integrated with that Clean Life in Practice Better, you can start to incorporate recipe collections or meal plans directly within a client protocol. So very similar to what Avita showed us when she was taking us through that Clean Life, we have the same functionality here where we can start to search, look through collections that we've saved or templates, and start to build out the recommendations for the client. So I could do this a little bit more manually where I'm searching something like berries and seeing the recipes that come up as per, the studies and what they were saying to us. I could look through tags to really hone this in and refine my search. But for today's example, of course, Avita has already shared with us the recipe collection that she has put together based on those trials and the findings and what she's built in that Clean Life. So we have this all ready to go for today's example, but I can go in and view these recipes, make sure that they work with my client's dietary preferences as we've now learned from the assessment form, make sure that that is all still relevant to that client, and then add that in there. As you can see here, I do have multiple added. So as a nice little bonus for this client, of course, because we're asking them to reduce their alcohol intake and focus maybe on only red wine, I've included some mocktail recipes. So when you're putting together these plans for the client, I can continue to add in and a nice little perk or bonus for the client to do something beyond maybe what they're expecting. Further than that, we have the ability to add supplement recommendations, lifestyle recommendations, or another place to add files. So again, Protocols is a fantastic place to take everything that you're working on with a client and deliver this resource in one easy to access place where they're not having to dig through their inbox for one thing and check another email thread for another and go through their downloads. Everything is really readily accessible for them, and they can even access this on the go. So if they have downloaded the Practice Better app on their smartphone, they might be in the grocery store and wondering, what they need for that particular dinner that night, or they simply forgot that grocery list they wrote down at home. I know I've done that countless times. They'll have that all at their fingertips, or they'll even have access to, say, the secure messenger where maybe they need to shoot you a quick question while they're in the moment at the grocery store and need some clarification on something specific. So this is a fantastic place to kind of take everything that you're working on with the client and put it together for them. So there you have it. I think we can go back to our other slide deck here.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, Brittany, about using different kinds of media in the description section, because that's something we do a lot in our clinical practice, and it makes it so much more inviting and accessible for the clients to use and play with.
Yeah, I think that we're all, we're getting programmed to have shorter and shorter attention spans as is. And then layering on someone who might be having, particular challenges with something else, it just might not be the priority to dive in and read some really text-heavy information. So you've got plenty of options there to just really make sure it works for your client. And that could even be a part of your assessment too, like what is your learning style and how do you want information presented to you? So while we looked at something like meal planning preferences today, know that you can use Practice Better even beyond that to really make sure that it's specific to the client.
You just said one of my favorite questions to ask of
Yeah.
clients. What is your learning style? How do you thrive as a learner? And it helps us be so much more client-centered and utilize all of these resources in such an efficient way for them.
That's amazing.
Well, also, segue leads to when we are talking about asking these questions, using these skills as a clinician, sometimes that can feel like it's a departure from what feels really comfortable of the role of the educator. If you went to school for nutrition, you spent a lot of time learning about how to teach people about interesting nutrition information. And sometimes clients need to get there really, truly organically. And incorporating technology like That Clean Life and Practice Better can aid in that process. And it's something that I think hopefully going over the questions that we covered today, you can have in conversation and that you can use in your intake forms or your monitoring forms can be really helpful. Um, I do want to share that there are lots of tools that you can use to serve your nutrition practice. And one of those tools, in addition to That Clean Life and Practice Better, is working on your coaching skills. So if you aren't already a certified health coach, we have been finding in the nutrition field that it is really useful to add that toolbox onto your clinical toolbox. It can make or break the difference between whether or not your client feels like they're really being heard and validated. And like we said before, the shift from education to skills. It can be so much fun for you and for the client. We at Clinicians Incubator do have a certified accredited health coaching program called Nested Health Coaching Certification. It is a trauma-informed coaching program with a focus on mental health, nutrition, but we also talk about all the other fun things that come in a health coaching program. And I do want to thank my colleagues Amber and Meg over at Clinicians Incubator for helping with these slides. And thank you so much to Avita and Brittany for collaborating on this project. This has been so much fun to put together. And I hope that it's useful for those who are attending and watching.